My name is Stig Ulriksen, and today I have a very special guest. She's coming all the way from California just to visit us here in Denmark. The reason for her visit is a guy called Elvis Presley, but she's been doing so many other things than just being together with Elvis Presley. She's an actress, she's a stuntwoman, she's singing. Is there anything you don't do, Mindi Miller? Welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
You actually ran into a guy called Elvis, and you saw him actually, you had seen him before actually in a car.
Yes, yes.
Can you tell that story?
Prior to moving to Italy, I was driving in my car. I had a Jeep. My girlfriend was with me. Her name was Carol. And we were driving north on Laurel Canyon, and we were at the intersection of Sunset Boulevard. And across the street was the most beautiful car I'd ever seen. Now, in LA, you see stars everywhere. Yeah, so I'm looking at this incredible car. And as the car comes down this way, I want to see who's driving it. So as the car comes this way, I'm looking, and the first thing I see are the sunglasses. And I see the very long pointed nose. And I immediately recognize it's Elvis Presley. And all of a sudden, it like just hit me in the head, like somebody just hit me. And I thought, oh my God, and I went like this, and I jerked the car over to the side of the road and parked it. My girlfriend Carol looked at me, she goes, what's wrong? She said, are you okay? I said, yeah. I said, but I just got the strangest feeling. I said, this energy hit me so hard. And I said, that was Elvis Presley. She said, yeah, so? I said, I got the strangest premonition, Carol, just now, that not only am I going to meet this man, I'm going to know him. Now, I was not an Elvis Presley fan. I saw his movies. My mom bought me a couple of 45s, Blue Hawaii.
But at that time, you had to be living in Siberia or China to not
know exactly. So, of course, I knew who he was. Of course, I went to see his movies. But I wasn't this fan. I didn't, I didn't follow him around. I knew who he was. He was driving one of the black Stutz Bearhawks he had. He had 4. One was white, and then the other 3 were black. So he had one here, one in Memphis, as I later learned. But this is before I moved to Europe. Well, after that, I moved to Europe. I was modeling and acting. I moved to Rome. And I was there for a year or 2. And then I came back here to close up my apartment. I mean, I would come back intermittently and go back and forth. But I probably spent a good at least 2 years there. So when I came back that week to close up everything, I ran into somebody I knew who invited me to a Hollywood party.
Okay.
And he didn't tell me where it was, but that's how the story begins. We can go into that later if you want.
Before we talk about that, I just have one quick question. Did Elvis ever drive the car with you in it?
Not that Stutz, not that Stutz, and I'm so mad.
And he never drove himself when you were with him?
Yeah, he drove himself.
Was he a good driver? That was my question.
Oh, he's a phenomenal driver. He drove my new car that he bought me in 1976, a year and a half after I met him. I asked him if we could drive the car from Vegas to Palm Springs, and I thought, gee, I get to drive my nice new 455 4-speed Hurst clutch white Trans Am. No. Elvis wanted to drive the car. He loved driving, and he loved muscle cars, same as I did.
And motorcycles.
Motorcycles, 3-wheelers. I'm the kind of girl that's a guy's girl. I like the cars. I like wrestling. I like the fighting. I love the kickboxing. I did.
I like all that. So you fit perfectly in there with the Elvis and the Memphis Mafia.
I actually did. Yeah. I actually did. I liked all the guys. I thought the guys were great. I didn't care that Elvis was with them or hanging out with them or they were in the room with us. I don't have that jealousy going, I'm the girl, they're the guys. There's no competition.
It actually looks, when you look at pictures with Elvis also, going back to driving, that he loved driving, He
loved
actually preferred the bodyguards and the others to sit in the back and let him steer the car.
He loved it.
It was only it looks like it was only when he had his shows that he was sitting in the back, or else he actually preferred to sit in the front.
Well, he was exhausted after the shows. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you stories
sense,
like...
But else he would actually prefer driving himself, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
But of course, if you talk, you can tell a little bit about this, we can move on to those afterwards, because people maybe don't realize how much energy you use when you are acting or if you're singing, standing in front of an audience.
It's a lot. First of all, there's a lot of emotion involved because you're giving of yourself. And this is why a lot of people cannot be actors or singers or dancers. It's self-expression. And if you are not able to just let yourself go and let your ego disintegrate, you can't have ego and be in the entertainment business. You have to just let it go. It's not about me. It's about you, the audience. It's about giving to an audience. People want to be entertained. I learned that at a very young age. People want to be entertained. It takes them away from the strife, the stress of life, things that are going on in their business, their work, their family, their loved ones, their kids. They have to have an outlet. What is the outlet? What do we normally do? We go to the theater, we go to a movie, we go to a concert, we read a book. We get out of ourselves. You have to put yourself on the back burner to regenerate, you know.
And Elvis was excellent when it came to
the best. There is nobody better, and never will be. Never will be. Yeah. God gave him as a gift to this planet.
Yeah. And tell us, when he came to the car after a show, or were you with him in Vegas also, when he was finished with the show? How was he just totally exhausted and just needed to be alone and have some quietness around him? Completely. If you see pictures of him when he just got off stage, his hair is usually very down, he's ragged, he's wet, his hands were bloated, you know, from the girls trying to get to him and all that. He was a mess. I mean, he just gave everything he had on that stage. He didn't know any other way. He didn't, you know, he didn't want to do what we would say a half-assed show, pardon the expression. You either give it all or you give nothing. Now, maybe sometimes in a show he wasn't able to give more for that particular show or that particular song. It doesn't mean he didn't want to. It may have meant at that time that he wasn't able to. There's a big difference. But when he was finished with the show and went to either the suite in the hotel or went to the car going there, did he need people to be a little bit quiet around him?
Yes,
so he would just
he would. What would happen is, after the shows, when I was on tour with him and the concerts and things, I would be ushered out first. So I would never be there at the last song. I was already ushered. One of the guys would take me to the car. I'd sit in the middle of the back seat of the limousine, and I would hear the music, but I wouldn't hear what he was singing. And I would hear, "Elvis has left the building," because it was really loud. Then I knew, boom, he's going to be on his way. That door opened. Joe Esposito, Dick Grobe, Al Strada, whoever it was, ushered him in the car. They threw a white towel around his neck. They literally held him, usually on both sides, because he was blinded by the lights. He had glaucoma. He was blinded by all the flashbulbs coming at him for you know, an hour, hour and a half, or however long. So he couldn't see. And usually you have stairs that go down because the stage is up. So he couldn't even see the stairs, and there's no way they're going to let him fall and break a leg or hurt his face or break a nose or something. So they held him by the sides and, you know, held him to go down the stairs, ushered him quickly to the car, because the girls were literally standing around the car. They'd wait at the exit, the rear exit, to try and rush him.
Because they knew that he would go straight to the car. They went off earlier just to be
Exactly. So they would rush him. Elvis, can I have an autograph? Or try to paw at him or something. So he would be rushed to the car. I mean, these are the days when that happened. I don't think they even happen anymore. Those were the days when that was clearly something to never see. Between that and the Beatles, you don't see that kind of behavior anymore. You just don't. So they would usher him to the car, he'd get in the car, close the door, lock the limo, and that car would be gone in 2 seconds. I mean, it was that fast, that fast. And as we would leave, the girls would be on the window, "Elvis! Elvis!" I mean, just, you could see him, hear him, and he would just kind of sit like this, and he'd put his hand up, waving, like, you know, and he'd be sopping wet. The car would be silent. You don't say a word, not one word. He needs to come down. He needs to begin to relax. He is, you know, crazy from all of it, and he's exhausted, exhausted. So I let him be. I usually had a towel on my lap or on my left. They were always the white towels. And I would start to dry him off. I would dry his face off, his hair, brush his hair back, you know, his neck, maybe his chest. And if he had one of the belts on, and I'll tell you a funny story, remind me to tell you this story, the belt would be tight. I would undo the belt and take it off, or slip it behind his back and take it off so he could breathe and open up, and pat him down. And his hands would be just like wet and bloated, because he had all the big rings on, you know, for the stage. Those were his stage rings. He wore different rings for the stage and different rings for personal life. And sometimes, you know, he'd interchange, but mostly he had his stage rings. And they were usually larger, more sparkly, you know, different. And normally the rings he would wear at home or just out were smaller, you know, maybe a black diamond, or you know, one of his little animal rings. You know, he loved the animal jewelry. But
he also had some,
he had the band-aids.
Band-aids to save that they were not taking off his fingers.
Yeah,
while he was getting
and because the girls would sometimes either try or just try to get him to just hold their hand even, or, you know, to touch them, he would have scratches everywhere. So not always, but sometimes they would be.
Did he then get some cream on the hands, or what did he get?
Yeah.
Because infections and things like that, I think.
Well, he didn't really, but he didn't get infections, but I would take the Band-Aids off. But his hands would have to come down from the swelling because they were swollen. So I would take the Band-Aids off, and then if I could pull the ring off or twist the ring, I would take it off and, you know, usually put it in my purse for safekeeping, the belts in my purse for safekeeping, dry his hands, and then he'd usually put his head back and his mouth would open and he'd just go like that, and he would just breathe, and he would start to meditate, because he meditated a lot. So he would put his head back, mouth open, and breathe. Nobody would say anything. You only spoke normally if you said, "Great show, E." "Boss, that was a great show." That was about it. And then he'd say, "Did you like it? Did you really like it?" Then maybe after a while he'd start to talk. When he started talking, the guys would start talking and answering and this. "Hey, boss, you want some water?" You know, and he'd always have his Mountain Valley water in the green bottle, and he'd always have that in the car and everywhere around him. He'd drink a ton of water. And then we would drive off, and he'd be usually staring out the window. You see pictures of him just staring out the window like this, right? A very normal picture for him. And a lot of people on Facebook, you know, his fans will message me on Facebook, or they'll ask me a question and they'll say, "What was he always staring out the window? Was he thinking about his mother? Was he thinking about a certain person? What was he thinking?" And I said, you know, none of the above. None of the above. I said, the fans always want to make it more dramatic, you know, "Oh, he was this, he was that." No, he wasn't. And finally, you know, one time I asked him, I said, "Honey," I said, "you're always staring out the window." I go, "What are you thinking? Are you able to share anything with me?" And he would stare like this. He would look back at me like that. And he would say, "You really want to know?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I really want to know. What are you thinking?" And he said, and he'd point his finger and he'd touch the window pane and he'd say, "I can't believe they all came to see me." He said, "Can you believe that?" And I would look at him, I go, "Of course they came to see you." He said, "Oh no," he says, "but look at all the buses, you know, the tourist buses, and all the cars and the taxis, and all the people walking." You see, "I can't believe they all came to see me, my show." He could not get over the fact that he had become this incredible entertainer. This country poor boy that, you know, may not have had food, but his mama would give him food before she'd eat. Maybe she wouldn't have any food, he told me, and he didn't know that at the time. He just could not believe that he had risen to this plateau of an entertainer, and he would just stare out the window.
Yeah.
And be grateful, and grateful to God. He said, I'm so grateful to God.
He always doubted himself a little bit, you know, couldn't believe that people would still see him next year or next year again. I remember Charlie Hodge told me something about that many years ago.
Who did?
Charlie Hodge told me that he always doubted himself.
Of course he did.
Will people still see me? Am I still good enough?
Oh, he'd ask me all the time, do you think they'll remember me? And I said, why would you even ask that question? He'd say, because, honey, he said, I'm just a singer. I'm just a singer. I'm nobody special. Do you think they'll remember me? I want to cry even now. Of course they're going to remember you, Elvis. We always told him, of course you're going to be remembered. Of course you are. The magnitude of this man was just, it was otherworldly. It was not of this planet. I mean, even today, there's no singer that's regaled as this man is. Nowhere in life. Never before, not during, not after, and never will be. Period. And that's just not me speaking. That's thousands and thousands of fans around the world, in every country I've been to, and it has become a family of people that just love this man.
And another thing is, I can love Elvis, you know, like a fan, and people around can love Elvis like fans. But you are actually the lucky one who got to know him and actually feel this charisma that we can only see on the TV, see on his movies, you know, when we see that, because we never met him in real life.
Yeah.
How was this charisma? Can you describe it in some way, this magnetism he had? Just as we don't talk about stage now, we just talk about when you met him, because you actually went to meet him one day, and we'll talk about that afterwards. But
as a human being, here's the thing. We all vibrate on an energy level. Everything that's alive on the planet has a vibration to it. Elvis and I were very much into all of that, as we soon learned when we met. But I was into this long before I ever met him. So by bringing us together, this became, for me especially, and I know for him too, the connection, the spiritual connection. But within all of that spirituality and all of it, the planet vibrates. The planet itself is a rock. It vibrates. Everything on it has a vibration. Every living thing, from the leaf to every animal to everything, vibrates on a certain wavelength. And I say this, especially after being in radio. You learn that radio operates on a frequency. If it doesn't have a high frequency, it can't reach a certain area. If it has a high frequency, it can reach very far, right? If it has a great frequency, it can come from New York down to Florida, to Texas, maybe even reach California. I don't know. It's the frequency. His vibrational energy, which is a frequency, was so high, it was off the charts. Which is why when we passed, and my window was open and his window was open, bam! It hit me, and it hit me hard. I knew, even then, that there was something extraordinary. Nobody normally hits you like that. If you interview other people, they'll tell you the same thing. When he entered a room, everything elevated. It just did. He was born with it. When I met him, when I finally met him, and I know we'll talk about that, I was sitting, and I all of a sudden felt that same energy on my right side. It was a kind of kinetic energy that just came like this to me, the vibrations. And my whole energy picked up on it, and it was like this, and I could feel it. And I went, something's happening. And I turned to my right to see what it was, and it was Elvis standing in the doorway staring at me. His energy entered a room before he physically ever did. You knew that something was going to happen. You know how you knew also? Go to his concert. When you would sit in the audience, the anticipation of his fans, and when they would play that 2001 Odyssey, and that music, which would raise the vibrational level, because that's what music does. Music, they're notes, but they're vibratory sounds, you see. So music being vibratory, having a very high vibration, is what Elvis connected with as a young boy, because his vibration, when he was born, being the number 8, ruled by the planet Saturn, all of these things come into play that the average person that is not into all this doesn't realize. They just know, they just feel something, but they don't know what it is. They can't describe it. They can't go into depth about it. Elvis could, I could. We were on the same levels on that way. This is why he was so drawn to music at a very young age. Also because his parents took him to church. He sang in the church at 2 years old. When I asked him, when did you start singing? He said, 2. I said, what? You started singing at 2 years old? He goes, yeah. He said, I was singing in the church. He said, I would jump out of the pew and come up to this top of in the little church, and he'd start swaying his body to the music, and, it was mostly black music. Well, you do not go to a church and not move when you sing. I go to black churches. Always did go to black churches, even before I met Elvis, because they have the best singing. When you celebrate God, you celebrate Jesus, nobody celebrates better than the black people. I mean, it's hallelujah, dear Lord. No, you are alive in a church.
Yes, sure. I love going to church when I'm in America. Especially the black church,
They're the best. Yeah. They're the best. I mean, these people are super talented. They know how to sing. Elvis was brought up with that. You see, none of this, and he and I spoke about it, none of this is coincidental. There's a reason for there's a reason you're born in a certain time you're born. There's a reason you meet your wife. There's a reason you have these particular children. There's a reason for everything. Nothing is by happenstance. Nothing is by mistake. Nothing. When you talk about the people that are put in your life for a reason, there's a reason. You may not know that reason right away. Okay? Just like I didn't know why I felt that, but I turned to Carol and I said, Carol, I'm going to tell you right now. She could have thought I was crazy, and she probably did. I said, not only am I going to meet him, I'm going to know him. I had no idea how, wasn't a fan.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
And how long did it go from you saw him in the car and until you actually met him at this party you should go to?
Probably at least 2.5 years, I would say.
So it's that long time we talked.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'd forgotten about it, completely forgotten about it. I was, I'm on to my other things. I'm living in Europe. I'm modeling. I'm acting. I'm gone. I'm out of there. I'm doing other things.
Yeah. And we have talked about a lot of things, but we have to go back to where we actually were at a point before we went around and talked about all the other things, because you were in Hollywood or LA. Yeah. And somebody said there's a party. Do you want to come?
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, I went out one night to it was a private club that celebrities and actors go to, and a gentleman that I knew had an agency, a talent agency, and he came up to me and we knew each other, and he said, hey Mindy, I haven't seen you around in a while. I said, no, I've been living in Europe. And he said, oh, it's great to see you. He said, listen, now that you're back, he says, I'd like to invite you to a party. I said, Ron, I'm really not into it. I said, it's a Hollywood party. I've been there, done that. I've been in Europe. I'm going to move there permanently. He said, well, listen, he said, if you change your mind, he said, please, would you give me your number? Now, I knew him, so it wasn't like just a random guy with a random phone number. I said, Ron, I'd known him for years. And he said, well, let me just keep in touch with you this week. And I said, okay. He called me every day. Now, I had just gotten in town. It was the first or second day, and I was going to stay about a week. So he called every day. So about the third day, he called. He said, listen, he said, I really want you to come to this party. I said, Ron, what is so special about this party? He said, well, it's going to be at Elvis Presley's house. And again, nothing rang true to me. I just went, well, that's nice, but I still didn't, I hung up the phone. I started going about my business in the apartment. I went, whoa, whoa. And I remembered the light went on. Elvis. Mindi, remember your premonition. Maybe you should just go. Get dressed and just go. It's a party. I'm not thinking he's going to be there. It's at his house. But Ron would have told me he's going to be there. But, you know, a lot of people rent out their houses or they lease them out for parties or whatever, right? So I just thought it's going to be a party, but just go. Maybe it might be fun to see his house. 144 Montevale. I buzz. They let me in. They had my name at the door. I take the, you know, long driveway up. I knock on the door, 10,000 beautiful square foot house. One of the bodyguards answers the door. I have no clue who it was. I don't even remember. Oh, hi, you must be Mindi. I'm looking. How do you know my name? This is a party. You don't, unless, you know.
Do you know everybody's name?
Right, exactly, thank you. So unless you have the list, and my picture, how are you going to know that's me? I don't think so. He didn't have a list, he didn't have a photograph of me, but he said, well, you must be Mindi. And I said, I looked at him very curiously and I said, yes, I am. He says, well, come on in. I walk in the house, I take a quick look around. No DJ, no people, no party, no food, nothing. Now, normally in today's world, you're going into a strange house like that and you don't know whose it is, and then you were led into a room full of guys, you're leaving.
You'll be running out.
You'll be running out. In those days, no. Plus, being in the entertainment industry, doing stunt work, being as physical as I am, I really don't, there's not a lot I fear. I can pretty well take care of myself in any situation.
But then again, if it's 5 guys, 6 guys, and
oh yeah,
then it could be a problem even you're good in karate.
Right, but this wasn't even that. This was like 13 to 15 guys, and they're all sitting around each side of the room and the back of the room. Now they walk me in and they go, hi, and I go like, hi, you know. They sit me on the couch with the coffee table in front of me. And they start firing questions at me. So what's your name? Where do you go to school? What's your family like? Do you have brothers and sisters? Are you religious? What religion are you? Are you spiritual? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do?
Did they ask you all these questions?
Oh, for an hour.
Didn't you ask them, is
no,
it a job interview or
no,
what?
No, but it was definitely an interview.
Yeah.
Now, of course, when I
Who asked all the questions? Do you remember which? Was it everybody?
All the guys. All the guys.
Okay.
All the guys. They were just firing questions at me. And I'm just sitting there very composed, like this. 24 years old. March, either 12th or 13th of 1975.
Didn't you think, what's going on
I
here?
I did. But I try to be very cool under pressure. You have to be. Because otherwise, you don't want people reading you. So you have to keep that kind of face. That's just, yeah.
And you were all alone? You didn't have any girlfriend with you or anything like that? All alone?
No, yeah.
Okay.
But you have to remember, I grew up alone.
Yeah.
You see? So for me to come into a house, I'm thinking, okay, I know Ron. He's not going to set me up in something that's really funky. I knew the guy that had wanted me to come to the party. So I knew something was up, but I didn't know what. I was ready to walk. I was ready to walk out of the house. Okay, but I'm a pretty sassy girl, you know. I can pretty much take care of myself, and you know, I really was not concerned. I just thought, well, this is really weird. I'm gonna see what this is.
They're very curious guys, you thought. That's.
Oh yeah.
That's for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And it was for an hour, and nothing happened.
Nothing happened, and so I sat there, and then it became very quiet, and then 2 of the guys, I don't remember which 2, got up and walked out. Well, I learned later they went upstairs to get Elvis. He had been upstairs waiting for me, watching me drive up, because he knew he had a date. I didn't know I had a date with Elvis Presley. I didn't know he was going to be there. I was going to a Hollywood party with a lot of people and food and drink and music and, you know, a party.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, the guys go upstairs, and they had the TV on, I'm watching the TV, and all of a sudden, I feel this energy, this kinetic energy. And it felt exactly the same as it felt when he passed me. And I went, what is that? And I turned to my right, and there's Elvis standing in the doorway. He had his little white tennis cap on. Not the Elvis Presley, but Elvis Presley. The guy, country boy, Elvis Presley. Not Elvis Presley with his jewelry and everything. No. This was somebody.
Just a private one.
This is somebody I didn't know. Yeah, private. Little tennis cap on, hair disheveled. He had his sweatsuit on that, you know,
his training
zipped. Yes, zipped up and down. It was a light baby blue, and then I think he had a dark blue or white stripe, you know, down the side. And he had his long, thin Tiparillo, I think, in his left hand with a yellow tip on it. And then he had his arm up on the, you know, the doorway. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he said, "Hi, honey." He said, "Sorry I'm late, but so were you." And I don't know why it hit me, but again, I'm picking up on this guy. This was funny to me. I didn't take it seriously. Now, anybody else could have thought, what do you mean I was late? They could have been very defensive about it. See, there is always a way to take something. You can take it positively, or you can take it negatively. I choose to look at it positively whenever I can. So he just struck me as being funny. He had a delivery. He could have been a stand-up comic easily. His delivery was unbelievable. His timing was impeccable, natural, impeccable timing this man had. We could remember jokes. He told jokes. He was funny all the time. I got him immediately. He looked at me. I was laughing. I threw my head back in hysterics. He looked at me like very curiously. He started laughing, then it broke the ice, and then all the guys in the room started laughing. It was like, whew, because they didn't expect him to come downstairs and go, "Well, sorry I'm late, but so were you." You know, but the way in which he said it was funny to me. And the way in which he meant it was funny. You see, he meant it funny. I picked up that it was funny. Anybody else could have picked up, well, that's kind of rude.
It could have been a very short date then.
And there would have been no date.
Yeah.
So he saunters into the room, looks at the guys kind of like, I got this. Yeah? Because already we broke the ice. Already I'm laughing at his joke. He comes around the coffee table. I'm sitting here. He's standing up here. He puts his arm out to me and he goes, "Hi, honey, I'm Elvis." And I look up at him and I go, "Hi, I'm Mindy." Calm, no big deal. He goes, "May I sit down?" I said, "Of course." I move over. Elvis sits down. We never stopped talking. Within the first hour, he said, one of the first things he said to me, in fact, he said, "I was waiting for you." I said, "I had no idea." He said, "Nobody told you?" I said, "No." He said, "Nobody told you you were coming to have a date with me?" I said, "No." He said, "What did they tell you?" I said, "I was told by our mutual friends that I was coming to a party at your house." He looked at me, he goes, "Those son of a bitches." Like that. He loved to swear. Yeah. Always, "Son of a bitch. Oh, son of a bitches."
But he didn't swear a lot when he was younger. It came later.
Oh, no,
I remember Sonny West once told me that, you know,
his mother
that he
would
didn't
never,
like when Sonny was cursing, you know, and he told Red many times, "Red, you have to have a talk with him. I don't like this."
Well, it was his mama, Gladys. She would never allow it. Are you kidding me?
But he did that a lot later.
Oh, definitely. And he was funny. When he swore, it was funny to me because he did it in such a way that it was funny. And I think anybody in his group, in his entourage, would tell you it was funny. I mean, there were times when, don't get me wrong, and I was there, when his temper flared. I mean, he could have a temper, forget about it. Don't we all? I do. I am the sweetest, most down-to-earth person ever, but do not get me riled. We all have that.
But it's good to have a temper, right?
Well, of course, you have to, first of all, you have to set boundaries in your life. If you don't set boundaries, people will walk all over you and take advantage of you. And that's with all of us. He was no different. He was a human being, no different than anybody else, but absolutely blessed in so many ways. He got some of the better gifts that the rest of us did not get, because it was supposed to be to him. He was the one. He was the chosen one to get those incredible gifts from God.
Yeah.
You know?
I would like to ask you a question about, you said we talked and talked.
Yeah.
How was it to talk with Elvis? Was he a good listener? Was he good asking questions? Or did he tell a lot about himself?
He was an incredible listener. He was so interested in what other people had to say. He was very intent. And he made you feel like you were the only person in the room. There could be 20 people in the room. Nobody else existed but you. He made you feel you were the only woman. He made you feel he was madly in love with you, whether he was or not. You were the only person that mattered. He was very, very centered and very disciplined. That came a lot from his reading, from his spirituality and the books that he read, how to be a better person, how to, you know, there were so many things. But also, so much of it came from the discipline of karate. When you do karate or karate, and you do any form of it, it is very, very disciplined. It's a very disciplined art, which I knew because I had been taking Shotokan. He'd been taking Kempo. And of course, you know, we had that in common. We talked and talked and talked about all the things we had in common. So this ceased to be Elvis Presley for me immediately. This became somebody that we just absolutely connected. And the discipline that he had was the discipline in honing in on you, looking straight in your eyes, not even blinking, and listening to you with intent that you probably never experienced. There was none of this looking to see who's coming in the room or who's behind you, or, you know, there was no disinterest. What you had to say was important. I don't care what it was important to him. And he made you realize that, and he made you feel that. And I defy anybody else that ever knew the man or met him to say differently. He was very, very centered in that way. And again, from different disciplines.
And you were lucky, of course, you shared a lot of interest, but was he also the kind of guy who, even though it was something that did not have his interest, he made it his interest because he was together with the person? Because
he wanted to learn. He wanted to learn everything. He was probably the most voracious reader I'd ever met. If I left the room, invariably I'd walk back in and he'd be reading something, whether it's a newspaper, a book, a piece of paper. He was always reading. He was just, he wanted to funnel knowledge. You know, he loved books. Loved books. I love reading. I love books to this day. And for him, it was so important to learn. So what you had to say, maybe it was something you could learn from. And one of the things I learned so much from him, but one of the things he said to me in the very beginning, on actually our first date that night, which was, you know, hours into the morning, of course, he said, you know, he said, Mindy, he said, we are all teachers and we are all students. He goes, me included. He says, I have a lot to learn from everybody. He said, the poorest man can teach you something. Don't ever dispel something because somebody doesn't look a certain way, or because they don't drive a certain car, or because they're not wearing certain clothes, or they didn't have a 4-year education. He said all of this. He said, everybody has a story. Everybody has a life, and you can learn something from everyone. And I never forgot it. So everyone to him was important. It wasn't just one person. It wasn't the poor man. It wasn't the rich man. It wasn't, you know, the producer that could, you know, produce his record, Felton Jarvis. It wasn't. It was everybody that the man came in contact with.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And regarding the reading, he read a lot of books, which many people who's not Elvis fans is not aware of. But actually, when he went on tour, he had a whole suitcase full of books, so he never ran out of books he could read, right?
Yeah. On our first date, in that first hour to 2 hours, we talked first about Hawaii. He loved Hawaii. I grew up in Hawaii. I did all my, you know, I did stunt work. I was gymnastic. I was all this. He loved that. I grew up riding horses from the time I was 7. He rode horses. I loved to sing. He loved to sing. I loved to dance. He didn't really dance, but in his movies he did. We just had so much in common. Then, the last thing was, are you a religion? Well, yes, I'm Christian. I was born Catholic, but I converted to Christianity. He said, well, why? We got in huge discussions about religion, theology. He studied Zen, Buddhism, Judaism, every form of Christianity. There are thousands of forms of Christianity, Catholicism. Anything you could think of, he studied. He was voracious about religion and wanting to know why people thought this way, when this community of people thought this way, and this country of people thought that way. It is, for me, is the same way, fascinating, because you become what you are trained to become by your parents, by your church, by your school. So you have all this that's been infiltrated into your brain. When did you ever stop and say, well, what do I want to learn? Well, I don't believe that. That doesn't resonate with me. You see, Elvis was a very free thinker. So even though he was brought up Baptist in the beginning and then Pentecostal when he moved to Memphis, he was a very free thinker. He had an interest in everything. He was very worldly. When you look at pictures of this little poor boy in the glasses and the jeans and things that he never wore after that, because he said those are for poor people. He never wore jeans. All these kind of things. He shouldn't have been that free thinking, because in the South in those days it's very clustered. You are a Baptist, you go to church, you think this way, you think that way. You're very boxed in. And I think in many ways Elvis played that game, but his mind was outside the box, for sure. And he knew it. And that's why, he had many quotes, like, I can't quote them exactly, but something to the effect of, you never walked a mile in that man's shoes, son, don't disparage somebody. I mean, because he knew. But getting back to the books, when he offered me the car and I turned him down, he said, your car is all bashed in the back. I said, nope, can't take a car. He was shocked. Then he said, we called Al. Al, bring me in my jewelry box. I'm thinking, jewelry box? Well, guy has a jewelry box. Al brings in this huge black box. He sets it down. I'll never forget this. He sets it down on the coffee table. Elvis opens it up, and he takes tray by tray. First tray out, second tray out, third tray out. I think there were 3, maybe 2. And then on the bottom. So I'm looking at these trays of rings. And he goes, honey, I want you to have a ring. He goes, pick one. Pick 2. And I looked at him incredulously, and I went, no, thank you. And he goes, what? And I said, no, thank you. I don't want a ring. He couldn't believe it. Nobody turned Elvis down. Nobody. They all took cars. Everybody took rings. Everybody took, right? And he wanted you to have it. It made him happy to give. He loved giving. He wanted you. His biggest thing was, I want to see your face light up. I want to see that smile. I want to make you happy. Because I can, right?
Yeah.
And, he's thinking 3 wise men bringing scents, myrrh, and whatever else to baby Jesus. And he's bringing, here's some jewelry, here's all this gold jewelry. And I'm like, no, and he goes, why? He goes, nobody turns me down. He goes, why? And I looked at him, and I already liked the guy. Forget Elvis. We'd already been talking, and I just liked him. And I looked and I said, first of all, Elvis, I wasn't raised that way. I was not raised to take expensive gifts from a man. Because in my time, that correlated something. You take something from somebody, he wants something in return. And I wasn't thinking that about him, but that's just the way I thought. I was trained to think that way. So here it was again, trained, right? And I thought, no. And in my mind, I thought, and I actually said this to him, I said, look, if for some reason we would start to date, or something down the road, and you offer something like that to me again down the road, that may be a different situation. I said, but we're not boyfriend and girlfriend, we're not dating, we're not in a relationship. And he looked at me and he goes, fair enough, fair enough.
That was a new experience for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the night continued, other things went on.
Did you stay with the boys in the room, or did you go for yourself at one point in the evening?
Yeah. So what happened is the guys had already left. Well, no, actually a few of them were still sitting in the room. And at that point, he said to Al, he goes, okay, he says, you can take all this away. Because he was trying to impress me in a way that I wasn't being impressed. If somebody wants to impress me, be you. Be who you are. Be your truth. Speak your truth. I can spot phony a mile away.
But he managed that too, right?
I saw through it. I saw through it. And I never told him. People have asked me, they said, did you ever tell him that you had a premonition that you passed him in the car? And I said, no, I never told him.
But also, I mean, from the talk you had, he made impression of you. He didn't need the jury to make the impression.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. And so what happened is the guys, he asked them, you guys, you know, you can go. You can leave the room now. He was comfortable with me.
Yeah.
So.
And was that in the living room you were sitting?
It was in
on?
the den. It was in the den.
Yeah.
The den. I have pictures of the house, and I still have pictures of the den. And it's really, it's nice to be able to look back on those pictures and say, oh my God, that's where I sat. That's where he was. That's where the guys were. There's the TV. There's the desk. Everything. You know. So he said to the guys, you know, you can go. We're good. We're good here. You can go. And so he said, what would you like to eat? Would you like to drink something? I said, no, I'm good. He goes, and then, you know, after talking in the karate, he says, you love karate, huh? He said, most girls don't like karate. I go, I love karate. I'm taking karate. He knew I was like a guy's chick. He's like, wow, you like firearms, you like horses, you ride, you do all this stuff. He goes, we have all the same things in common. I said, yeah, we do. And you have to remember, he wasn't Elvis Presley. He was just Elvis Presley at home, chilling, baseball, tennis little cap on, not looking like, I mean, obviously handsome as could ever be, but he wasn't, you know, he didn't have the jewelry, he didn't have the, you know, the blouson shirt,
right?
And just relaxing. Yeah. That's how he relaxed at home. Yeah. So then he said, honey, he said, I'd like to do something for you. Oh, already, always wanted to do something for people. I said, well, what is that? And he said, I'm going to surprise you. Because obviously, if he told me what it was, I'm not going to accept it. So he goes, I'm going to surprise you. And I said, okay, like that. And he goes, you just sit here. And he went in the other room. And later I found out he went to get Dave Hebler, Sonny and Red West. And he went upstairs and he put on his gi, which is his karate gi, and one of his black belts. And he came downstairs to this long hallway, kind of, in a large area where they could move, you know. And he said, honey, stand right there. I said, okay. And all of a sudden, he goes into what they call a kata, which means you stand, and it's before you perform your, you know, your sequences and your, and all, you know, whatever, and your roundhouse and all these things. So he's standing there and he's meditating in his kata. And I realize now what he's going to do. So he does this to Sonny. And Sonny and Red come at him like they're going to fight. And he starts going through these moves and these kicks and these roundhouses and these back, you know, back kicks and all this stuff. And then, you know, Dave is over here, Sonny's over here, Red's over here, and he's putting on a private karate exhibit for me. And I thought, wow, this is great, you know. And I wasn't thinking, again, I'm not thinking Elvis Presley. You know, this is just my date for the night. This guy's great. And he did that whole thing. He went through that whole number, and then he kind of, you know, comes back and okay, and then he comes over to me, he goes, how'd you like that? I went, I loved it. That was great. And I gave him a big hug. And he looked at me, you know, because I was, that impressed me more than the car and the joy. And I looked at him, I go, that was great. He goes, you like that? And I said, yeah. And I gave him a big hug, and he hugged me back, and he goes, I like you. And I went, I like you too, you know. And it was the beginning of, I didn't know what, you know, and I wasn't even thinking, here I'm leaving at the end of the week to move back to Europe. I just thought, this is a great night. What a really fun night this is. And I have to call Ron and thank him. You know, this turned out to be really fun and really sweet. And at that point, he said, honey, he said, I want you to come up to my room. And already, I wasn't even thinking anything. I could already tell. And he said, it's not what you think. And I looked at him, I went, I know. He goes, what do you mean you know? I said, I know. He goes, you do? I said, yeah, I do. And he said, okay, well, come on. So I went up to his bedroom. Of course, nothing happened. And he sits me on the edge of the bed. And he goes, well, he says, you know, I've been here a few days. I've been recording. I said, oh, okay. He says, I've been recording at RCA. Well, that was the last time he ever recorded at RCA. And it was a song he just finished called Trouble.
It's a great song.
My favorite song, besides his gospel and How Great Thou Art and all of that. And it became my favorite song, not because he sang it, or not because he sang it to me that night, but because it's a great rockabilly, rockin', hard beat song. And I love music like that. Travis Tritt, the country singer, did that song. He did a different rendition of it, and I fell in love with his rendition too. So at the end of this long room, which was his bedroom, the master bedroom at the house, he had the tape machine, you know, the old tape machines that go round and round. And he turned that machine on. You know, it was reel to reel in those days. Everything was reel to reel. So he turns the machine on, and he said, I just finished recording this song. He goes, tell me if you like it. He said, you'll be the first person to ever hear it. I thought, that's pretty good. That's pretty nice. He starts singing to me privately and goes into it. Not like he would on stage.
So his vocal was not on the track? Or
no.
Was he singing along with his vocal? Okay.
He sang to me. It was just the track.
Okay.
He had another, you know, piece that had him singing, but he put on just the track.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then he sang it to me privately. I was a little bitty baby when my daddy hit the skids. Mama had a time trying to raise 9 kids. Da-da-da-da-da-da, because it was impolite. And then something, da-da-da-da, just to treat you right. And it was Trouble. And then later on stage he'd go, right? And I fell in love with that song. And he finished it. He said, do you want to hear it again? I said, you bet I do. And he sang it again. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. He goes, so you really like it? I said, yeah. He said, do you think I should do it on my next tour? I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Many people must be jealous of you just for that, you know.
I know, I know.
And then we don't talk about all the other things.
I know. Trust me, I've been living
night,
it.
Because Elvis was always awake, people maybe don't know it unless they're fans. He was awake late evening and until the morning, and then he slept.
Yes.
So
and I'm a
was
night
he singing all night?
I'm a night person too.
Okay, that's
See,
perfect.
so again, we had that in common.
That's perfect.
It's no problem. So now it's 12 o'clock, right?
And he sang it a couple of times, the song.
Yeah. So now he's thinking how, you know, he's making the date up as he goes along, which is fine. I'm just there. He says, excuse me a minute, walks outside, goes downstairs, talks to a couple of the guys, comes back upstairs. He said, are you good? Would you like a soft drink? You want a Coke? You know, anything to drink? No, I'm good. Everything's fine. We sit down, we talk again about a little bit about his life, a little bit about my life. He's opening up a little bit, but he's very private, right? So he's not just going to open up and be a can of beans, as they say. But he's beginning, you know, just as the night's wearing on, he's beginning. About an hour later, hour and a half later, and we're still talking and, you know, what do you like? What do you like to do? What movies do you like? TV shows do you like? All that. He never said, do you have my record? You know, never, it was never about him. Never, about him. It was always about, what do you like? Where have you traveled to? What do you like to do? All those kinds of things. I hear this knock on the door. Come on in. One of the guys comes in with this huge box. He goes, here, boss, here's what you wanted. Go through and, you know, make sure everything's there. So Elvis looks, he's looking this, and he goes, okay, I got it, thanks, see ya. He says, honey, come here. He goes, I want you to look in there. I said, okay. Ton of books. Ton of books. He said, pick one up. I said, anyone? He goes, anyone. Now, prior to that, we've been reading the Bible, too, a little bit. So I pick up one of the books. And he said, open it. I open it. And he goes, start reading to me. I started reading to him. And as I'm reading, I'm realizing what I'm reading. And he said to me, do you realize what you're reading? I said, yes. He goes, what's that word I just said? I said, realize. He goes, no, but what is that word? Realize. He said, no. He said, you're reading with real eyes. Therefore the word realize. He loved to take words and cut them up to make other words as to what that word might really mean. So when you realize something, you're seeing things with real eyes. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. How many of us think of that when we're talking? I didn't. No. Very few people do. Man is deep. I mean, not just that, that's the surface. The man is so deep, you have no idea. So he says, you're reading with real eyes, and do you realize what you're reading? I said, yes, I'm reading spirituality. He said, good. He said, turn the page. I turn the page, start reading. He takes a pen out, and he says, what is meaningful to you here? I said, well, I really like this. He said, take the pen and underline it. I said, no, you underline it for me. He took the book and he underlined it. He goes, now, that's what we're going to do. He said, these books are for you. He said, you won't take a car, you won't take any jewelry. Will you accept the spiritual books? I looked at him, I went, absolutely. Yes, I will.
Do you still have those books? That's just
yes, and I brought some today.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
And that's one thing he was known for, that he was underlining when he was reading, because he could go around for a long time just thinking about that sentence, you know. It must have been a very special date for you. I guess it's the first time you were on a date with a guy where you were reading the Bible and books together, right?
Yeah, but see, for most girls, they could have cared less. They weren't interested. For most girls, their whole thing is, oh, he's gorgeous. Was he a good kisser? What I wouldn't give to be in bed with him. Never crossed my mind. Didn't cross his mind.
No. But it was a special date, right? Not that it was Elvis, but sitting and reading the Bible and reading spiritual books. Absolutely, absolutely. Any other connection we had came later, and it did. But the point being is, when you are getting to know somebody, it's not about sex. It's not about jumping somebody's bones. It's about connecting with another soul. It's about connecting with a heart. It's about connecting to another human being. That's what it's about, and that's what it should be about. So we immediately connected on that. He knew it, and I knew it. And we read the rest of the night. He talked about books. He said, Mindy, he said, you're on the path. He said, and you and I are going to read these books. We're going to study these books together. And I'm thinking, okay, well, we're going to study them for the night, and it'll be great. I'm not thinking anything down the road for the future, you know. We did that. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning comes. I'm not even tired. We're just like, our energy levels are bouncing off the walls in the bedroom. We're just reading. We're just having a great time. They bring up water. They bring up coffee. We're having a great time. Nothing's happening. 7 o'clock, I look at my watch. I go, Elvis, I said, I really better go. He goes, why? Why do you have to go? Can't you stay? I said, no, I've got to go. So
finally, he walks me downstairs, and he said, take your books. And I took this huge vat of books down to my car, and he walked me out to my car, and he said, am I going to see you tonight? And I looked at him, and I thought, yeah. I said, I'd love to see you again. I'd love to come back tonight. He goes, I tell you what, he goes, I'll pick you up. And I said, okay. And he said, give the guys your address, and I'll pick you up tomorrow, and, you know, we'll let you know what time, whatever. I said, okay, great. And I gave him a hug, and I kissed him on the cheek, and I said, thank you very much. I said, this has been a really lovely evening. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. He looked at me, he goes, I have too, like that. And I drove off, and I drove home. When I got home, it was about 7:15, 7:20. I only lived 15, 20 minutes away from Holmby Hills. So I drove home. I drive home. The phone is ringing. I'm like, who the heck is calling me at like almost 7:30 in the morning? I pick up the phone. I said, hello? He goes, hi, honey. It's Elvis. I said, hi. I said, what are you doing? So I just wanted to call you and see if you got home all right. I said, I did. Thank you. It was so sweet. I was so touched. I was so touched. I said, thank you. I said, I really appreciate that. We ended up talking for 2 hours more on the phone.
It's amazing. And was it, when you talked, was it mainly about the spiritual things that you had in common, or was it all kinds of things?
All kinds of things. But the bond that really formulated for both of us that night was the spirituality. And I didn't know Larry Geller at the time. And of course, I later found out that Larry was kind of the male part, you know, of his spirituality, and that Larry had introduced him to a lot of these books and got him really, really on the path as well. But Elvis had been searching. He'd been looking. And I believe truly that God brought Larry to Elvis. Not, you know, maybe in the beginning as his hairdresser, but of course, much more than that, as we know now. Everybody and everything happens for a reason. They were meant to meet. They were meant to be together as friends, as buddies. You know, the other guys weren't into it, and that's okay. But they had their purpose and their friendship with Elvis, and each guy had their friendship with Elvis in a certain way, and Elvis loved each and every one of them for his own reasons. You know, most of the guys, you'll hear him say, well, he was my best friend. Well, yeah, Elvis probably was your best friend, but who was Elvis's best friend? You know, it works both ways. That doesn't necessarily mean that you were the closest to him, but he liked you, or he loved you as a buddy.
Maybe he had many good friends.
He did.
In his own eyes.
He did.
Yeah.
You know?
Mindy, we could talk for hours.
I know.
More. You know, it's great. I love it. Then
everybody says you've got to write the book, but you see, he didn't ever want me to write a book. He said, you don't talk about what's private between a man and a woman. You don't talk about what happens, you know, at Graceland or on the road. It's very special between two people. Yeah. I would never think to say things that I've heard, because I don't read these books. I don't read any of them. But his fans have come to me and said, did you read what so-and-so put? Did you read what so-and-so put? We're very angry. We don't like that person anymore because this person said this. And I'm like, what can you do, you know?
Yeah. But back to your story. We have to keep straight on the story, or else we will not reach it.
I know.
Because he actually come and pick you up the next day. And
he did.
He did. Up to the roof.
Yeah.
Couldn't he just sit in the demo just like every other?
Why be normal?
Yeah.
How boring. Why be normal? I loved it. So I'm in the apartment. It's the next day, that night, and I'm dressed, and I'm no plans, you know, just hang out, whatever. And he told me the time he'd pick me up. Well, I'm looking out my bedroom window at this long limousine coming down, and I see this figure standing up, dressed all in black, gorgeous. Now this looks like Elvis Presley, you know. And he's got. Did you ever see the movie? What was it? Pretty Lady. Pretty Woman.
With Richard Gere.
Do you remember him coming to save her, and he's standing up in the limo through the moonroof,
yes.
And he's got flowers? That was Elvis, but he had a long rifle.
Was that romantic, like flowers, or did it work for you?
Yeah, it was. I was like, well, there's my knight in shining armor. That was like that was like your knight in shining armor coming, dressed in black, on the black steed horse, coming down the road, coming for his woman.
But why with a rifle? Did he ever tell you why he bought?
Because he liked firearms. I did too.
I know that, but in a limo and standing
because
up the
he
roof?
knew I liked firearms, and he was going to show me this particular rifle.
Okay.
See? But I didn't really get that at the time. Yeah. So what happened is he's coming down the street, and he's standing up with this rifle looking... I mean, I wish I had a camera. I wish. I never even thought to take pictures. I later was told, you don't take pictures of him. You don't take pictures of the house. You know, there are certain things you don't do. His fans got better pictures with him than I ever did. I never thought to ask him. I didn't look at him as Elvis Presley. He was my boyfriend. I never thought to say, oh, honey, can we have a picture together? A fan says that. And even the guy said, you don't do that because he'll think you're like a fan. He won't want to date you. He didn't date his fans, you know.
He kept the distance between those two.
He absolutely did. He had to.
Yeah.
And so he's coming down the street, you know, and he's standing there and you know, like get in the car. And
it's good it's not nowadays, you know, with a rifle. He'll get shot, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, then it was a different, you know, you're going back how many years ago? Over 40 years ago. Yeah. Things were different.
Yeah. So tell the story. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
That's okay. So, no, you know, I instead of just running out to the car, you know, a proper thing to do is the gentleman comes up to the car. Well, he didn't want to get out of the car, which I understand because he's Elvis. You know, people see him, they rush him. He couldn't. So he had one of the guys get up, and even though I saw the guy get out of the car, I waited, like the proper young lady you're supposed to be, knock on the door. I open the door. Hi, Mindy, Elvis is in the car, he's waiting for you. Let me escort you out. Okay, great. Escorts me to the car. Elvis opens the door. He goes, hi, honey, how do I look? I said, you look great, you know. He was like a kid, you know. He wanted confirmation that he was grand, that he was great, that he was everything. And he was. He was the best. He was the absolute best. And I think because the first night, the night before I met him, he was kind of disheveled and just being who he was. And he didn't know what to expect. So he wasn't like really putting any effort into it. And the second date, the next night, he was just, you know, much like a woman. You know, we do our hair, we do our makeup, we do our nails, and we want to look pretty, you know, for a date or whatever, as opposed to being in hair curlers and, you know, our sweats and hanging out at home. It's different. So you want to, you know, you kind of want to pump it up a little bit. So we drove around Beverly Hills, and he was showing me places that he, you know, that he had been or that he'd like to go or he'd never been. And then we drove around some of the studios that he did some movies in. And he goes, oh, honey, I did this, you know, this movie at this studio. I did over here. I did over here. And then eventually we went back to the house again. And we read more, and no more gifts exchanged. He could tell I didn't want anything. I was not accepting anything. And I stayed until the morning. Nothing happened. We were just absolutely, you know, friends at this point, dates. And then he sat me down in the bed. He said, honey, he said, I want to talk to you seriously. And I said, okay. He said, I want to ask you something. I said, okay. He said, you've made me really happy. I said, well, thank you. I said, that's really nice to hear. And he said, but, he said, I don't know what your personal life is like and everything. He said, do you have a boyfriend right now? I said, no. He said, are you dating anybody seriously? I said, no. He said, well, he said, I'd like to be your boyfriend. He said, and I'd like you to be my girlfriend. And I looked at him. This is the second date. I didn't know what, really, my jaw was on the floor. I didn't know what to say. So I said, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking, just be honest. Just be honest with him. And I looked at him and I said, give me your hands. And I held his hands. I looked him straight in the eye and in the eyes and I said, Elvis, I said, I'm moving. I said, I came back here because I've been living in Rome, Italy for the last year or two. A couple of years. And I said, I came home to LA to close up my apartment, sell my car, which is why I didn't care to get a new car, and it's bashed in and I don't care, and to get the rest of my clothes. I'm moving back to Europe at the end of the week. He looked at me in shock, absolute shock. He said, you can't. I said, but Elvis, I am. He said, you can't. I won't let you. And I looked and I went, what do you mean? What are you saying? He said, I want you to stay here. I want you to be my girlfriend. He said, I will do whatever needs to be done for you to stay here. I said, but look, I said, I know you're an entertainer. You're traveling everywhere. You're always gone. You're this, you're that. I said, when am I ever going to see you? He said, it won't be like that. I said, how is it going to be? I mean, I put him on the spot. I said, how is it going to be? He said, you're going to come on tour with me. He said, I've got a tour starting in April. He said, I've got a new plane. I've named it after my daughter, Elisa Marie. He said, I'm getting it all refurbished, redone. He goes, I want you to see it. I want you to be on it. I want you to be on tour with me. He said, you'll be one of the first people to see it. He said, and I'm going to sing your new favorite song, which is T-R-O-U-B-L-E on tour, and I want you to hear it. And I go, really? You are going to sing that song? He goes, yeah. And he says, but I need you to make a decision. He said, and it's got to be fast. He said, because I have to leave tomorrow. And he had to go back to Memphis. And I had to make a decision because I've got an apartment back in Europe. I've got an apartment. I've now given, you know, my notice. I'm leaving. I had somebody want to buy my car. I mean, I had to really move on this quickly and make a decision. So I looked at him again. I said, look, you have to be absolutely serious. I'm not going to be sitting here left alone. I said, I'm moving my whole life for you. I said, and I wanted to be very emphatic with him. And I said, look, I said, the only reason that I'm going to stay here is for you. And he looked at me, and he didn't say anything. He said, okay. He said, okay. He said, I promise you. I said, okay. He said, I want you to do what you have to do. Make your phone calls and all that. He said, now. And he had apparently already been thinking about this because he had things planned. He said, I want you to meet somebody, and you're going to meet him tomorrow night, and they're going to give you something. And that will enable you to take care of what you need to take care of. I had no idea what he was talking about. I just said, okay. He said, I will call you tomorrow before I leave. He said, when I get home to Memphis, I will call you. He said, we're going to keep in touch. He said, if some time goes by, don't think I'm not going to call you. He said, I get busy. And he was very famous for it. I mean, he could date a girl and not see her for 2 months and not call her. That's how he was. He just was like that. And you either sat and you waited, or you moved on with your life and dated somebody else. But if he found out you were dating somebody else, he wasn't interested anymore because you weren't there for him. He wanted to know that you were going to be really sincere and you were going to be there for him. And the entire time I knew him, I never went out on one date.
If I just was waiting when
I waited.
Yeah.
I waited.
And you can say, okay, but he had other girls, but you, of course, did not know it
I
back
didn't
then,
know. I didn't know.
And I was thinking, okay, Linda Thompson
I didn't know. At
also.
the end of the second date, the second night, David Stanley came downstairs and he said, you have made him so happy. I looked at him and I thought, I made Elvis Presley happy? Oh, how did I make him happy? He goes, well, he says, you don't know. He says, but I'll tell you. He said, and Elvis just told me. He said, and that's why I'm coming downstairs to tell you, because he's so excited. He said he has needed somebody for so long that's spiritual with him, that he could relate to on his level, meaning his energy level, okay? And David said that, on his level. He said, and he doesn't have anybody. And he said, and he's looking for a new girlfriend. Now, I had heard of Sheila Ryan, who I later became friends with. She was a very sweet girl who sadly passed away. And she and I became very friendly, but she was going off to marry Jimmy Caan, the actor. So Elvis was looking for somebody else. I didn't know anything. I had heard of Linda. So I could only assume from what David said is that he was looking to move on. There were other things that were said, looking to move on, okay? So that's when I got home. He called. But after that second date, he said, "You're going to meet with someone tomorrow night." I get the call. They say, "You're going to meet Joni Esposito." Well, Joni Esposito was the ex-wife of Joe Esposito, who worked for Elvis. Joe and I later became very close, very good friends. Turns out he lived a mile away from me. Go figure. Nothing is happenstance. Everything happens for a reason, right? Turns out also that all the spiritual books Elvis got, they called the owner of the bookstore, told him to open up the bookstore, and Elvis had given the guys a list of the books he wanted me to have. Very specific. So this was all thought out. He made it look like it was... He didn't do anything by just chance. Everything he did was, you know. And as it turned out, I later told him that that was my favorite bookstore. I lived down the street from the Bodhi tree. It was my favorite spiritual bookstore. It was Elvis's favorite spiritual bookstore. Okay? Nothing is by chance.
It is amazing,
right?
actually.
No, the whole thing is amazing. And so what I was going to say is that I met with Joni, and we met at a restaurant called Ships that's no longer there. And very sweet, very pretty lady, Joe's first wife. And we sat down, we had a cup of coffee or whatever we had, and she gave me an envelope across the table. And I said, "What's that?" And she goes, "Elvis wants you to have it." And I said, "Well, what is it?" She goes, "I don't know." She said, "I haven't opened it. I'm not to open it." And I said, "Okay." So she goes, "But when I give it to you, you're to open it, and then I have instructions for you." And I'm like, this felt like Mission Impossible, you know, should you choose to accept this? And I opened the envelope, and it's a wad of cash. And I counted it. It was $5,000 in $100 bills. I said, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And she said, and he had it numbered. 1, keep your apartment and pay for at least 6 months of rent. 2, you are not, repeat, not to go back to Europe and get your clothes, because he was afraid I was going to stay there. You are to have them sent back to you. Get somebody and have them sent back to you. 3rd, you're going to get your car fixed since you won't accept a new car from... All this is written. Since you won't accept a new car, you're going to get your car fixed so you have a car to drive. And 4th, you're supposed to get some really nice clothes, like hot clothes, cute clothes, to go on tour. And the rest is yours. Now, I thought, my God. My God. I called my mother. She goes, "You're kidding me." I said, "No, Mom, I'm not." She was like, couldn't even believe it. She goes, "Well, what are you going to do?" I go, "Well, I have to get a job. You know, I'm going to be here. I'm going to work." So Elvis wasn't giving me tons of money, you know, to pay for a year or 2 years of living while I'm waiting for him. I just met him, nor do I expect it. Just because he's famous and he's got money and he's Elvis, you don't just expect things like that. I always worked. I worked from the time I was 12 years old. I've never not worked. I don't know what it is not to work. I've always taken care of myself. I've never had somebody buy me a house, give me children, you know, do all these things. Women don't realize how lucky they are when a man puts a ring on their finger and takes care of them. They really don't get it. I do. Everything I have, I had to do myself. So I said, "Mom, I got to go get a job." She goes, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go get an agent." So I had to quit my agent in Rome, Italy. I had to call them, write them a letter and say, you know, "I'm staying here. I've changed my mind." Never told them why. Never told them I met Elvis. Didn't say a word to anybody. But I'm the kind of person that if I'm going to be known for something, I want to be known on my own laurels. It's because you think I'm talented. You want to hire me to do an acting job, a hosting job, whatever job, radio, TV, I don't care. It's because it's on my laurels. Not because I have somebody's name, not because I dated somebody, not because I'm going to bed with somebody. You know, nepotism is one thing. I want it to be proud of myself to know that I did it. I didn't have somebody have to make a phone call for me, you know. Again, that comes from fierce independence and having to do things on your own. So I called, I got an agent, this and this, and then I was modeling and acting, and then Switch came, the TV series.
Perfect. And then we are back to Switch, where you started out earlier, and you got a role in it, actually.
Yeah.
And,
so what happened is I went for the interview, and we already talked about the fact that I, told him, the resume was in the car when it wasn't and all that, and I ended up getting it. So I go on the job, I do the job, and I think, well, that's great, then you wait for your next job. So it's not like you go to a job every day. You're only in the entertainment industry as good as your last job. So right away, I'm calling the agent, Well, she calls me about 4 days later, and she says, they want you back on Switch. They want you to come back. I said, you're kidding. She said, no, they really liked you. And they had given me dialogue. They saw that I could speak, that I had dialogue, that they liked what I did. They liked my look. RJ liked me. Charlie Callis liked me. Eddie Albert, the actor he was with, liked me. Sharon Gless liked me. We all got along. They decided to bring the character back for another shot, in the Bouzouki bar. So I was like this, the hostess, waitress kind of thing, They had a little cute outfit and all that. I was a very dark brunette, my natural color. And RJ came up and started talking to me. He said, well, when were you born? Like another inquisition, when were you born? And I said, this is my descent. He goes, Natalie. He goes, my wife is Russian. And because where my dad was born was on the edge of Russia, Poland. So he said, it's funny. He goes, when are you born? And I told him, he goes, my wife is a Cancer too. I said, oh, is she? He said, yeah. He said, she's dark like you too. I said, yeah, I know. She's a very beautiful woman. He said, and she's also Russian. I said, yeah, me too. He said, interesting coincidence. He says, yeah. He says, she comes on the set and visits quite a bit. Maybe you'll meet her. I said, I'd love to meet her. And this is before Natalie Wood passed away. And of course, I never said a word that I was dating Elvis. Now, I already knew that he had dated Natalie Wood.
When did he date her?
Oh, long ago.
Okay.
She was like 19.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was a kid too. And they went on a few dates, I guess. And but she was crazy about Robert Wagner from the time she was a little girl. And she even told me this. She said, I was always crazy about RJ. I said, well, how old were you? And this is when I met her. She said, I remember walking down the hallway with my mom at the studios, and he passed us. And she literally looked to her mom, and she tapped her mom on the coat, and she said, Mom, I'm going to marry that man one day. And her mom said, sure you are, dear, sure you are. And she did. When she was 18, she married him. She loved Robert Wagner. And I will tell you, I had a huge crush on him. Very handsome man, nice, a gentleman, very old school Hollywood, brought up very well. His parents were from a steel mining company, something like that. He had a lot of money when he came to Hollywood. So he was like the golden boy, And he and Elvis had known each other. They were friendly, they were friends. So, we could have double dated at that point. RJ, me, Natalie, and Elvis at that point. So you never know what could have been. But I never said a word because I was told by the Memphis Mafia guys when they came to me and they said, okay, Elvis has told us you're his new girlfriend. Here's what you need to know. Now, apparently they told the girlfriends that. My understanding. 1, you don't ask for pictures with him. I have so many of his fans come into me on Facebook. Well, you must not have dated him very long, or you must not have known him, or you must not have this or that, because you hardly have any pictures with him. I have to write them back and say, the reason there are no pictures is because he didn't like to take pictures. When he was home relaxing, he was relaxing. The last thing he felt he needed to do is sit there with his arm around you and take a picture. That's not who he was. You guys, the fans, got better pictures with him than I did. Any picture I have with him is a candid shot. It's somebody that took us coming off a plane or sitting in a car, or me walking ahead of him, or me sitting at the side of the stage, you know, that have been years old that nobody knew who it was. And then when they found out who I was, you know, Robert Klein came to me, all these photographers came to me and said, "Is this you?" I've had this picture for over 40 years and kept it because I knew there was somebody that he was dating, but we could never figure it out. We never figured out who this girl was, who this girl was, who this girl was. Is this all you? Is this you with Alstrada at the funeral, walking out? And I went, oh, emphatically, no, that's not me. I didn't even recognize myself.
That's amazing.
And then I had to look at the shoes and went, oh my God, those are the green shoes I wore to his funeral.
Yeah.
All these photographers kept all these pictures all these years. And when any of this happened, I cried. I literally broke down and cried because there were pictures. And I shut myself off for so long. And they said, so you don't ask for pictures. You don't go around his house taking pictures of the house, you know, at all. You don't talk about him, that you're dating him. And then he told me himself, what happens between a man and a woman is private. What you see here or on the road or anywhere that we are is between you and I. You don't share that. That's us. That's special. You have respect for the man and the woman. I said, Elvis, you don't ever have to worry. I would never do that. I didn't need to make myself say, oh, I'm dating Elvis Presley, you should hire me. No, I got it on my own.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell him. But then what happened is they ended up making my role of Revel, R-E-V-E-L, a reoccurring character until the show ended.
Yeah. And you actually had to take off from work to go to the funeral.
I did.
But,
I did.
But you went on tour, if we go a little bit back, you went on tour with him in April 75,
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. I had not gotten the show by that time. Mm-hmm. Because he had asked me to go on other tours and I couldn't because I was doing the TV show. Yeah. So I couldn't. I wanted to, but then I couldn't get off. So I said to him, you know, not harshly, but he'd say, okay, honey, you're coming with me on this. I say, Elvis, I can't. He goes, well, what do you mean you can't? I said, well, I have to work. In other words, if you want me with you, you know, how am I going to work, pay for an apartment, travel with you? I can't do it. It's got to be one or the other. You know, and I said to him, I can't get off work. I said, they will blackball me. I can't not do it. He said, well, you can tell him you're coming with me. I said, you told me not to tell anybody anything, and I'm not. He goes, well, no, but if you told him you're coming with me, they'd let you off. But you know what they would do? They would write me off the show. And if they did that, and for whatever reason, he and I may stop seeing each other, where am I? I've moved my whole life from Europe to be here with him. I'm out of my 2 new TV series, and I'm not dating him anymore. I have to be a little bit smarter than that. Yeah. I said, Elvis, as long as I'm on the show, this is how it's going to have to be.
And back to that, how was it to go on the tour with him? Because I can imagine it must have been very different compared to
difficult.
What you've been used to.
It was difficult, but I got used to it because, again, being a professional in that field, you have to pack quickly. When somebody says jump, you have to jump. And things were always changing, as they do on a tour, you know. Maybe this was done a different way, or this was done, or you had to fly out at 12 or 11 a.m. and fly in for a noon show. They would get him off the plane. We'd go to the dressing room. He'd get in a jumpsuit or whatever he was wearing. You know, maybe he just had time to, you know, meditate a little bit, pray, because he prayed before every show, meditated, you know, shucked and jived with the guys to kind of loosen him up, tell some jokes, and then he'd go on. And then they'd sit me at the side of the stage, I'd watch everything, and then they would hustle me in, you know, out. This went on day after day after day after day.
And going back to that, when the show ended, you were in the car already, he went to the car, we talked about that earlier, and then you went to the plane to fly to the next city,
sometimes
going to a hotel.
Yeah.
What did you do when you were finished with the show? Did he need 1 hour just to be himself, and then he wanted to eat something, I guess, because he was never eating before a show, and then you're sitting reading books together, talking about
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And many times, and even in this particular picture here, if you want to hold it up, or I could even hold it up to the camera, This photograph, you know, I look horrible, and it's a grainy photograph because it was taken by some paparazzi or something. But we had just been in his bedroom in the plane, and we were in the bed, and we were studying the spiritual books, reading and studying together, and he had the Bible. So the thick white part is his Bible, and then the other books were some of his spiritual books that he also gave me. So this particular picture, even though it's not a great picture, has very special meaning to me because it's what we were about. And people say, well, where were you? And I'm like, I don't remember if we were going to Colorado or where we were going. Again, I didn't write everything down like a fan. Well, today at 8:30 we went da 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 da.
And again, if you're on a tour, you know, one city looks like the other, you know.
We saw three things. We saw the limo, the hotel, and the venue. That's it. That's what we saw.
Yeah.
So you had to be really strong and really tough to be able to continue this, and a lot of the girls didn't want to do it. They did not want to keep on tour. It's, you know, and for him that's tough because he's the one that's got to get up on stage and sing and emote and be there for his fans, not just doing all the other stuff that we were doing, just being there for him. So this particular picture has a lot of meaning for me. It's a lot of memories of really how we connected and why we connected in the first place.
Well, thank you very much to share your memories with Elvis with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. After 40 long years, it's a long time.
And to all of you, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you again another time. Thanks.